Hello, everybody, and welcome to Salt City Hoops on a fine Tuesday when this is being published, or whatever day you happen to be listening to uh, this lovely podcast we're about to do today. It's the off season. There's never anything particularly urgent, but it's me, Mark Pereira, and the reason I wanted to get on the horn and start talking to you on this random day is because we've had a few developments in Utah Jazz country. We've had our first couple games of Summer League and Ace Bailey and the rest of the good young guys. We've had a John Collins trade. We've had a Jordan Clarkson buyout. That I felt like let's stay on top of it. Let's give the fans some updates and my personal opinions on some things, and give you some details, some cat minutia behind the scenes on the trade. I've watched every tiny second of each of the summer league games. I got myself a fresh beer here ready to go. So kind of break it up a couple different ways. I haven't decided which to lead off with, but I think and certainly skip around as you want to. But I'd like to start with the John Collins trade. So the trade that was announced on Monday morning was a 3-team trade between the Miami Heat, the Los Angeles Clippers, and the Utah Jazz. Where on the heels of the Colin Sexton trade, I think a lot of us were nervous that, well, if Colin Sexton, who is a net positive player on a pretty much a net neutral contract, Utah had to give up a second round pick to offload his expiring salary and get even more expiring salary and a worse fit for Utah in use of Nurkic in return. So I think Colin Sexton is a worse fit for a lot of teams than someone like John Collins. But John Collins was also making way more money, about $7-8 million more than Colin Sexton. So it's kind of eye of the beholder type situation. You were going to have fewer teams out in the market who could take on that kind of salary for John Collins versus Colin Sexton. So does that kind of match up with the fit issues? Like, there's only so many teams that could take on Colin Sexton's role, right? So like to distill that a little bit easier, every team could use a John Collins. Off the bench starting, I think there's a lot of ways you could use that kind of player. Not every team really wants anything to do with Colin Sexton's skill set. But Colin's salary, I actually have to be very careful here, John Collins' salary, we avoid the Colin problem now on this team. John Collins' salary is a little bit more difficult, in fact, significantly more difficult to fit in trade constructs than Colin Sexton. So was Utah going to have to give up some sort of bad second round pick to offload John Collins with the goal of saying, look, whether it be a league mandate, an ownership mandate from Ryan Smith, or this is an Austin Ainge mandate, where we're saying we are not going to manipulate minutes this year, we being the Utah Jazz. And if we're not going to manipulate minutes, that also has to jive with the fact that it would be organizational malpractice to be the worst team in the NBA and then a season later in a very talented draft give up your top 8 protected draft pick to the NBA champion Oklahoma City Thunder. The Jazz have to keep that pick for next year's draft. The Jazz are bad enough, I think, naturally to make it happen. And when Austin Ainge says there's going to be absolutely no minute manipulation or whatever, I think that's going to be a little bit of an exaggeration. I think every team is allowed a little bit of license and leeway in February, March, April to tank a little bit, but I think we were tanking very, very, very early last year. So I don't think it'll be as aggressive with that. And if the Jazz finish with the 5th or 6th worst record in the NBA, I think that's a very attainable goal. And if they get jumped by 3 teams in the lottery and finish 9th at the end of the day and have to give up the pick, that's just horrible, good old-fashioned Utah Jazz luck. And as Dan and I have said on prior podcasts, that if the Jazz end up having like a 500 season or some by random thing, it's going to be because this team is actually incredible. And that'll have other things to be celebrating, right? Like the improvement of Isaiah Collier, Keontae George, or maybe Ace Bailey is a stud from day one. Which, by the way, a spoiler alert to the other segment, I think he might be quite amazing. But not to get too far off track. So we were all kind of worried about the John Collins trade that was definitely going to be coming this summer, or if not this summer, certainly by the trade deadline. But more likely than not was going to happen this summer. Was Utah just going to have to give him up for nothing or have to attach a pick to him? Now, the return, let's do the overall trade, actually. And we'll talk about the Jazz are receiving from Miami Kyle Anderson and Kevin Love. Oh, Kevin Love, that's a name I know. A lot of you probably know Kyle Anderson as well. A couple of expiring contracts there. We'll talk about what it means for them in a minute. A second-round pick, I think in 2029 from the Clippers. I think it's 2027. I misspoke. So it's from the Clippers, and in 2027, I think that's likely to be just a middle-of-the-road draft pick, right? We'll see where Kawhi Leonard and James Harden are in a couple years. I don't know. That doesn't seem like a great second-round pick to me. So it seems like net neutral assets coming in, but one significant thing that they're going to be able to receive in this trade that is going to be sneaky good is a $27 million trade exception, $26.58 million trade exception. And I'll get into that, I think, a little bit more details. I'll break that down, how the Jazz get it, what they can do with it. But they're getting a giant trade exception as part of this. John Collins is going to the Clippers. The Clippers are sending Norm Powell, who got fringe all-star consideration last year, to the Miami Heat. Norm Powell feels like such a Miami Heat player. I can't explain it. But the Clippers angle of this is interesting to me. I was very down on John Collins 2 seasons ago. Last year, I thought he was wildly improved, and he actually, I think, had his best season as a pro. I would have loved to see him play more than 40 games. I think we forget how absolutely aggressively the Jazz really did tank last year. John Collins, he had a couple actual injuries, but there's no reason he should have played as few as 40 games last year. So, Norm Powell is a little bit, I think, significantly older. He also has his own injury concerns, but John Collins is a worse player. But I think fits alongside a lot of their interesting lineups. Can start, come off the bench. A lot of interesting things here. You do worry about the Clippers scoring punch when Kawhi Leonard is out, which is inevitable in any season. And James Harden he's a very good player still. I think he's underrated to this point, but he's no longer the efficient scoring dynamo that he once was. So Norm Powell played a very real role for the Clippers, and that's interesting. And on the Heat side of this whole transaction, adding Norm Powell to a Tyler Hero-led team is also kind of, maybe they're the team that could actually have used more of the John Collins element here. And the Heat and the Clippers, by doing this trade, they both enter the luxury tax just by a few $1 million, but and when you're in the luxury tax by just $2 to $5 or $6 million or something like that, it is relatively easy to get out of the tax, which is only assessed at the end of the league year, right? So, or the end of the regular season, I should say. So there will be time at either this offseason or the trade deadline for the team, either the Heat or the Clippers, to get out of the tax, which is important, if only not because I care about owners or that much, but when you start doing things like repeater taxes or whatever, when you're a non-title contending team, it actually does become prohibitively expensive to even run your basketball team, unless you are a Steve Ballmer type where you have more money than God. A lot of I think it's fair to say that all these billionaires have more money than God, but sometimes it is some are more godly than others, perhaps when it comes to the balance sheets. And so Miami Heat, they're getting Norm Powell out of this, kind of rejiggers their offense quite a bit. The Clippers are receiving Utah's John Collins. very high on what he did last year after being one of his most vocal critics a couple years ago. His usage rate went up and his efficiency skyrocketed, which is not a combination you see very often. I think his defense was wildly overrated in Atlanta. His defense was atrocious 2 years ago. He was sneakily pretty solid as a team defender last year. You don't want him playing isolation defense. He's not going to block shots very often. I found that he was in the right place more often than not, and I had a hard time getting mad at him defensively when the guard play was also just so atrocious and he was being put in awkward positions. But I thought I never saw him making aggressive mistakes or getting his ankles turned on some sort of because he wasn't paying attention or something like that. So I think John Collins will fit in fine. Also, he'll be playing alongside Ivica Zubats, or Brook Lopez all the time, right? Great rim protectors. I can't believe Brook Lopez is signing up for a backup role in Los Angeles. I've never been to Disneyland. I guess it's just that fantastic for him. Now the Jazz. That's why you're here. What are the Jazz getting out of this? They're just getting a measly second-round pick and a couple players that aren't going to play. So the second-round pick doesn't mean anything. Let's say I just don't think second-round picks mean anything anymore. I think getting them helps you grease little trades. Like the Jazz moved up 3 spots in the draft this year. They gave up 3 second-round picks to move up 3 spots in the draft this year. They moved from 21 to 18, right, to get the guy that they wanted in Walt Clayton, who's looked pretty good in Summer League, by the way, already. The Collegiate National Tournament Player of the Year, National Champion. So having second-round picks is good, especially if you give one up in the Sexton trade. But come on, get something. Get a pick back. That matters. No swaps or anything, just a solid second-round pick. And teams are loath to trade protected first now anyways. This is something that I think a lot of fans lost sight of when we were trying to get first-round picks as part of the Sexton or Collins deals, is that teams, in order to send packages of multiple first-round picks to make a difference, they have to be unencumbered because of the Stepien rule, right? Like you can't have 2 first-round draft picks traded in back-to-back years out on your ledger. And if you have a protected first-round pick, the Jazz ran into this in the Gobert Mitchell years because of this dang Oklahoma City pick. If you have encumbered first-round picks, you then can toll the draft picks that you're eligible to trade when that obligation is extinguished, when it's guaranteed to be extinguished. Any of my dipshit lawyer friends can say, like, hey, this feels like the rule against perpetuities. It is. It's the NBA's version of the rule against perpetuities. So by adding protections to a pick, it reduces the amount of every other year picks you can trade. Because if you have a draft pick that has protections going out for 4 or 6 years, well, you can't trade any of those years that it's protected. So if I trade a 2026 first-round draft pick, lottery protected, and it's lottery protected for 4 years, you can't trade any of the picks during those protected years. You can trade the unprotected portion, which is a little bit interesting, but you can't trade them outright, right? So, and that creates more of a problem. So you're not really, I just feel like teams are loath to trade protected first round picks unless they can convert pretty quickly. Like, hey, we'll trade you a lottery protected first round pick this year, and then it's top 10 protected one more year, and then it's top 3 protected or second round picks after that, right? We saw that with the Detroit, New York picks. We saw it with, or was it the Washington, New York picks? There was some trade where Washington or Detroit has some sort of obligation from a draft day trade that is finally extinguishing based on Washington's surprisingly optimistic outlook. We'll see what happens there. I don't have my draft pick chart in front of me right now, nor is that important to this conversation, which is Utah got a second. But I think what's way more important is going to be the players coming in and the traded player exception. So starting out with Kyle Anderson and Kevin Love. So Kyle Anderson has a year this year for $8 million, and I think another $8 million the year after this. That $8 million for next year is not fully non-guaranteed. So that is not a concern as far as like how come the Jazz are taking on future money, whatever. You can also use that non-guarantee for interesting things next offseason. It really doesn't matter. But Kyle Anderson has always been an NBA oddity. Slow-mo Kyle Anderson, who also now plays for the Chinese national team, by the way, which I think is interesting. You know me, if you ever heard me talk, I love my international basketball. I think it's interesting when NBA players get to play for interesting countries too, based on their family heritage. I always think that's interesting. He is, in his best days, a barely winning basketball player. But at the end of the day, he still has extreme mobility concerns. He has the slowest jump shot in the league. And he simply can be described as a 6'8", very, very, very good passer with a huge IQ. And his slowness is not a hindrance yet all the time at the defensive end. He's considered to be a good team defender. This is the exact sort of player I want on this team. The Jazz have a small forward now, not just Taylor Hendricks. They have a real veteran small forward on the team who can say, like, look, you're going to play 20 minutes a game. Kyle Anderson's going to play for this team. It's possible we buy him out. We'll see what happens. But Kyle Anderson is the exact kind of player that you as a Jazz fan should be, excited is not the correct word, but you should be encouraged by his presence on the team. This is a player where him getting minutes isn't blocking minutes necessarily for Ace Bailey or something, or Cody Williams. It's more that on any of these lineups where you're going to have 3-4 young guys on the court at once who really don't know how to play NBA basketball yet. Maybe they do some things that are exciting. Maybe they have some real talents. Maybe they show out. Maybe they have a great game every once in a while. But getting like 4 young guys to all kind of do the same thing correctly and good night after night after night, it requires on-court predictability and experience and almost like on-court coaching. And that is exactly what Kyle Anderson can provide. Also, this team doesn't really have any quality point guards, right? I am wildly optimistic about Collier. I'll talk about his summer league performance in a minute. I really, really, really like Isaiah Collier, especially as like pure table setting point guard type, right? Even if he projects as a backup, we'll get there. I think he does project as a backup point guard, but I'm really high on like, hey, we found a guy at the end of the first round who can play legit point guard minutes. I think that's really cool. And Walt Clayton looks pretty solid okay so far. Had 6 turnovers in tonight's game, but I think he's good. Kyle Anderson is immediately the best point guard on the team. Like, he's obviously a 6'8" forward type, but like he's known for his passing and table setting and if you're familiar with Joe Ingles, he's even slower than Joe Ingles. He's Joe Ingles without the jump shot, but with a lot more physicality and guile to his game, if you can believe it. And he and Joe Ingles get compared for a reason. I think if you've never seen Kyle Anderson play, you're going to think, oh, yeah, that's Joe Ingles, but he's not. He has no three-point shot. And if he does have a three-point shot, teams are absolutely willing to let him take it. That's the sort of player that is going to make the lives of all these young guys easier. Like, hey, I'm going to get my ball in the spot I like it because Kyle Anderson knows where I like it. He's a guy who is going to be in the right place defensively or make the right decisions defensively. He's got passion. He notably, got in a big old physical altercation with Rudy Gobert in Minnesota a couple years ago, right? So he's a kind of guy that these young players are going to like playing with and will improve them faster. You can't just throw 5 feral creatures onto the court and expect quality improvement curves. It's going to be very roller coaster and shittily, and the expectations will be shitty, I should say. Whereas if you add some sort of competence to what you're doing out there, it will rapidly improve their development curve. It's why I'm a fan of having Walker Kessler and Lauri Markkanen on this team. Those two players are very, very good. I don't think they're going to jeopardize the Jazz draft pick this year. But by these players learning what it means to defend on the perimeter, knowing you have Walker Kessler behind you to cover your ass, it allows you to experiment a little bit. It allows you to improve your own individual and team defense understanding and awareness, because you're not just, if the opponent scores, you're not sure if it was your fault or your fellow rookie center's fault or something like that. Oh, Kyle Filipowski can't defend the rim. Oh, my guy scored because Filipowski couldn't defend the rim. Whereas, like, if you look back at the tape, both of you fucked up. Right? Whereas, like, having Walker Kessler out there helps in that. Lauri Markkanen, just having a sharpshooter all-star forward around the wing is just like, okay, that is the best player. So me, coming from where I've always been the best player no matter where I've ever been, oh, now I know what it's like to defer in an NBA context, right? Or here is a guy that I can run a pick and roll where he's diving or taking alley-oops or he's picking a pop from three. Like, this is how I learn what NBA winning is meant to be, even if you get an L at the end of the day. I've beat the subject to death on many other podcasts, and so has Dan, so I don't want to kill it. But Kyle Anderson is good enough that if he's playing 20 minutes, he deserves it. I think he's still a player that some teams would like to have in their rotation, even a playoff rotation, depending on what they need. He's not super great, so he would ride the bench on a lot of playoff teams. Like, Denver couldn't use him, right? Like, I don't think they need more non-shooters, but that's an example of a team that, like, needed a guy. They really needed a guy out there, who, especially a player who could pass on the non-Jokic minutes, right? Like, there's teams that could use his skill set, and yeah, he hasn't played on a non-winning team in a few years. I think he's been like, with Minnesota, Miami, Memphis. He's definitely played on a share of non-winning teams. At this stage in his career, is he going to be a grumpy asshole about being on the Jazz? I don't really know about that yet, so we'll see where that goes. But if you see him playing 20 minutes, let alone starting day one, guys, don't be alarmed. I really would not be alarmed by his presence. And in fact, I'd like to keep him. Kevin Love, I would also like to keep. He is on a $4 million or $4 million-ish expiring contract. And unlike everyone else, like, this guy is an NBA champion, and he likes playing on quality basketball teams. He was the end of his mega contract with Cleveland, was on some pretty awful basketball teams before they drafted Darius Garland and such. But he's in Miami now, or he was in Miami, on competent basketball teams. I'm not sure how thrilled he'll be on a losing basketball team, but I could see Utah saying, for the same reason as Kyle Anderson, we don't mind having you around, and unlike Kyle Anderson, you're not good enough to play anymore. And we got Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler in front of you. We have Ace Bailey in front of you. And between you and Kyle Filipowski, you can kind of see the writing on the wall, man. We're going to play Filipowski over you as well. But Love is the exact kind of veteran that I love on this team. Oh, and Yusuf Nurkic, God forbid. So again, Nurkic, you've heard Dan and I's complaints about Nurkic, because that's a guy who's good enough to play, and I don't want him getting in the way of Filipowski minutes or Hendricks minutes or something like that. So we'll see. But Kevin Love is a guy who I think belongs on a developing squad. Like, that would be great for Utah if they agree to keep him around. I think it's more likely than not, though, that he gets bought out and signs for a minimum somewhere. The problem is that no playoff team can use him right now. He's just not good enough. He's simply not good enough. He is a player that good playoff quality teams can deploy for 30 games a year for 10 to 20 minutes and say, look, we need to give our all-star a break. We need to give our all-star forward a break, or somebody's injured and you're now part of the rotation, and we don't hate it because you can pass, you can shoot, you can rebound, you can't defend a paperclip, that's fine. Just get out there and play. So even if he was to accept a buyout from Utah, he might go unemployed the whole season. So why not ride it out in Utah? And you actually, I think, will get some minutes in Utah in certain situations, right? So we'll see if Utah plans to keep him. This is a good trade for Utah, though, because of the traded player exception. And so under the new CBA, collective bargaining agreement, one new cap quirk that I think this is one of the things that I was most excited about for those of us who love team building and concocting trades and whatever, is when you're trying to trade players to teams, you're hunting for not just salary matching, because I think a lot of people are familiar, you can only generally send the same amount of salary out as you're receiving. There's some obviously percentage differences there. If you're in the second apron, if you're over the second apron, it creates some issues there. There's some additional details, but without getting into all the minutia about what it means to try to facilitate trades, one of the things that was hard was like if the players all made sense to kind of trade with, like, teams to trade between one another. If the salaries didn't work from a salary matching perspective and the wiggle room you're allowed, you just couldn't get the trade done. You had to find a third team who had cap space. And by the way, nobody has cap space anymore to make trades. Even bad teams, like, there are benefits to staying over the cap just to help facilitate other uses of exceptions, like the mid-level exception and things like that. So what the new CBA added was that the mid-level exception, whichever team has access to, there are differences on how much that mid-level exception is based on if you are a luxury tax paying team, if you are over the cap, if you're using the room exception. But if you have access to what I'm going to call the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, which is about $14 million, or I think it used to be, I think it's about, $14 million. 14.1, I think, specifically. Instead of just being able to use that exception to sign free agents into your mid-level exception, and it's exception as a means to say, like, okay, if you're over the cap, you can sign a player into that exception to being over the cap. You can also now receive players into that like a traded player exception. So if a player is making under $14 million, or a collection of players is making cumulatively under $14 million, you can tell a team, like, hey, you trying to get rid of that guy? I'll take him on, I'll put him on my payroll, I'll pay a salary for you, and you can trade him into my mid-level exception. It doesn't have to only be used for free agents now. It makes every single one of the 30 teams, maybe not every single one, depending on your cap situation, but it theoretically can make every single one of the 30 teams a viable trade destination for sending a player somewhere. Because you no longer have to just be like, oh, well, we're over the cap, so we got to do some salary matching. Or, oh, we're under the cap, or we're only under the cap by less than what that player makes, so we can't take on that player's salary. Every single team can say, like, hey, you know what? I have a use for that guy. I'll take him into my mid-level exception. And so by Utah, they're actually going to construct this trade so that Kevin Love's $4.15 million and Kyle Anderson's $9.2 million. I thought Kyle Anderson was around $8 million. I guess these are around $9 million. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my stuff in real time here. They are going to take both of those players into their mid-level exception this year. Why does that matter? Because by sending out John Collins from their list of salary obligations, his $26 million, by sending that $26 million out and taking players in, not in cap space, but under that exception, they now have a traded player exception. I guess the way to explain it, if I was explaining this to anybody, would be that $26 million that John Collins occupied doesn't go away necessarily. The Jazz can still retain that $26 million as an open gap to receive players in later on. and that's the traded player exception. And that will last for an entire year from the date the trade is consummated. So the reason this is valuable is because that is to put it densely, that is a huge, huge amount for a trade exception. Right now, it is by far the largest trade exception in the league. The second largest trade exception in the league is DeMar DeRozan at $17 million, almost 17 of which was used by the Kings to absorb Kevin Huerter. Or as part of the Kevin Huerter trade, I should say. The third largest one is the one created by the Bulls for the Zach LaVine trade at $17 million. Funnily enough, the Sacramento Kings also created their own trade exception for Kevin Huerter of $60 million when they sent him to the Bulls. So there's, kind of like duplicating trade exceptions there. You get Miami Heat's $60 million trade exception from the Jimmy Butler trade. Atlanta Hawks has a $13 million one from the Bogdan Bogdanovic. And it goes 13, 11, 9, 8, 8, 8, 7. So it starts at 17, the rest, all these trade exceptions. And Utah has a $26.58 million trade exception. And that is significant because not only is it so much more than the second highest, but because when you start getting into like the below the mid-level exception amount, which most of these are, so if you have DeMar DeRozan's is mostly used, right? So you have John Collins' $26 million trade exception, Zach LaVine 17, Kevin Huerter 16, and Jimmy Butler 16. Every other trade exception below that is less than the amount of the mid-level exception, or the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, I should say. So they're just like less inherently valuable. Like they're good trade grease. You want them so you can help facilitate trades and whatever. But it's only the ones that are really over the non-taxpayer mid-level that teams are picking up the phone and saying, "Hey Utah, hey Sacramento, I have a need to get a trade done, and I need to send a player into your trade exception to make this trade happen." And the more money that a team needs to send out. Also, this could be pure luxury tax reasons too. Like, we lost our star player. We're not going to be a contending team, and we need to get out of the luxury tax because the owner said so. But my player makes $24 million. Utah can just pick up the phone and say, "We'll take him. Sure, give us a few second round picks. We'll take him out of our trade exception for John Collins." Other teams might not be able to do that because of the size of the salary or whatever. If by taking on that player into their own trade exception will put them over the luxury tax. We'll see what Brooklyn's cap space ends up looking like at the end of the summer, because obviously you can trade a player into cap space without any issues. So we're going to be competing with Brooklyn in that respect. But every single team who is trying to facilitate a large salary transaction, they frequently run into the problem of the 2-3 teams who are together trying to make a trade look around and say, like, we have to send $20 million out somewhere and we can't figure out how to do it. Call up Austin Ainge. We'll get it done. And Utah will be a destination for acquiring 2, 3, 4 second round picks or young talent, whatever. It could be a lot of different ways that Utah says, we'll help you get that deal done, but it's going to come at a price. I would be colossally disappointed if Utah does not end up using the traded player exception by the time it expires. And you have to use it all at once. Either like you can break it up into piecemeal. So Utah could take on a $10 million player here, $16 million player there. And it expires a year from today. So it expires on July 7th, 2026. So this will carry through to the trade deadline. It'll carry through to the draft next year and everything. So lots of different trades can happen. So I wouldn't call it an asset. I'm not going to gaslight you, dear listener, and saying like, the Jazz got a traded player exception out of this deal. No, they didn't. But it is by far the largest trade exception in the league. That's what I want you to take away from this. Is They didn't just get a trade exception, they got the biggest one in the NBA. So now every team has to call and pick up the phone to Utah if they're trying to get trades done, because they are going to be the easiest spot to help them out. That's going to help the Jazz get more assets than just the second round pick for John Collins. The reason this didn't work in the Sexton trade, obviously, is like Sexton, we traded him for actually more salary, and Yusuf Nurkic makes too much money to fit into the mid-level exception that we absorbed Kevin Love and Kyle Anderson into. Also, of course, I would be dense not to mention, like, hey, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the Jazz need to lose basketball games. And John Collins and Colin Sexton, they're winning basketball players. There was a podcast we did sometime last year where we noted that the Keontae George, Colin Sexton, Lauri Markkanen, Walker Kessler, John Collins lineups, their on-court rating was extremely good. Their net rating. Like, borderline playoff worthy good. And it was like, oh, hold on a second. Like, we're okay, like, trying to be fake good last year when the prize of the draft was Zachary Ricochet or Alex Sarr. But no, we're trying to be real butt this year, and we can't have any sort of playoff quality lineups playing enough minutes. So you get 50 games out of Lauri Markkanen, 40 games out of John Collins, or whatever. But you can't do that year after year. And I think you can deal with a one shot of a culture hit to your team, maybe 2 years, but probably just one, where you're convincing all your rookie players and second year players that winning doesn't matter. Winning just doesn't matter. And I think if everyone who is quality is playing on purpose, and even veteran players who perhaps aren't all that quality are given a reason to play and try hard, and they're not just being kept out for whatever reason, I do think that helps, or that could hinder young players' development and just their culture as well, if you keep doing that. Now, there's obviously a good counter argument to say, like, who gives a shit about the culture development or the cultural development of Keontae George and Isaiah Collier if they're really just going to be middling basketball players at the end of the day? I totally get that, which is why, like, okay, we punted last year, and we did it one time. And now that we're adding more talent, we're seeing the examples of the quality of these young players kind of showing out a little bit. Ace Bailey, Bryce Sensabaugh has been terrific. I'll talk about him. Walker Kessler is still a young player, guys. Still has room to grow. Then I think in order to shape the next great Jazz team, you have to try. And if you are going to try and you want to keep your bad draft pick, you got to get rid of the competence on the team. You don't need to bottom out. You do not need to trade Lauri Markkanen for pennies on the dollar. You don't need to trade Walker Kessler for a shitty pick from the Lakers. You can keep some quality on your team. But Colin Sexton and John Collins were not going to be part of the next great Jazz team. They were not going to get better than what they were. I think we were all kind of hoping Colin Sexton would improve. And he got a little bit better on some tertiary things, but he by and large was the same player the whole time. So you're not holding him around to think like, oh, he'll be better this year. And John Collins is kind of what he is. Like, I loved his performance last year, but he's not going to be someone that you're banking on improving or doing something different for the next great Jazz team. So they do not fit on the team at all. So the last thing I'll say on the Collins and Sexton trade, I think, is saw a lot of comments on social media after the Collins trade by people aghast and bewildered that this is all Utah could get for John Collins. And look, I really don't give a shit about defending Danny Ainge or something like that, but like a lot of people saying Danny Ainge has lost his fastball or the Jazz don't know what they're doing, whatever. The Jazz have been trying to actively trade Sexton and Collins for 2+ years now. If the Jazz had a better offer for either of those players on the table, don't you think they would have known about it by now? I think it's more likely than not they turned down perhaps better trades over the past year. The Clippers GM mentioned that they've had interest in Collins for a couple years now. So it's possible that they lost a better offer sometime down the line. But I can guarantee you those offers are probably like, oh, 2 second-round picks. Oh, instead of paying a second-round pick to swap Sexton for Nurkic, the Hornets would have given up the second-round pick. Like, I don't think the Jazz lost out on some premium offer because they were holding out for more. I think holding out for more is how they got a pretty sweet deal in the Conley trade, right? Where we got that Lakers first-round pick, as opposed to the shitty seconds that they would have gotten if they offloaded Conley ASAP. Although I think it's always counter-argued to me, and I think it's fair that offloading Conley for seconds or whatever that shitty offer was would have allowed Utah to be much worse 3 seasons ago, so that the Victor Wembanyama lottery balls would have been more kind to us. That's fine. I think Utah decided that they'd rather hold out for a better asset return for a quality player. Mike Conley's better than any of these guys we're talking about, by the way. Can't play a counterfactual on whether that was correct or not, but I understand why fans are disappointed. Like, well, you should have taken a shittier return for Conley to help boost the tank during that year. But with Collins and Colin Sexton, the offers of quality were just never there. And I'm purely conjecture to say that they were even better at all. They could have been. This could have been the best offer that they've ever gotten for John Collins, or they've always been offered just a middling to poor second-round pick for John Collins, and this is the only trade that they've ever had where they said, "Hey, we can actually absorb those players into a mid-level exception to create a new traded player exception." We never thought that getting rid of John Collins' $26 million would have gotten us any sort of trade exception. This is fantastic. So there's ways that I can see this being the best trade for them. So net at the end of the day, I'm still really disappointed in the Sexton trade because I don't think it's worth attaching a second to him to get an expensive, worse, curmudgeonly player. I don't think Sexton by himself hurts the tank as much as John Collins does. I think having Colin Sexton around and playing some point guard around Collier and Keontae George doesn't really affect winning so much. And I would have been fine just kind of holding on to him until a team is like, look, okay, fine, we'll give you the second round pick, or we'll give you a second round pick for Colin Sexton. But at the end of the day, do I really give a shit? No, I don't about whether we paid or had received a second round pick alongside of it. And my opinion is going to kind of waffle on that when we see Nurkic in camp in preseason to see what kind of effect he has. For what it's worth, if you follow him on Instagram, he's always posting extremely positive things about Utah. He's reposting Utah Jazz highlights that have nothing to do with him. We've certainly seen his on-court loafishness and issues, but I will always point to the fact that I think a lot of his fellow teammates, seem to like him, and I wonder what kind of positive effect he'll have on a losing basketball team as far as just being a person who might be nice to be around. We'll see. Pure conjecture there. So the Jazz clear up the minutes for the young guys. Austin Ainge mentioned that on the Grizzlies broadcast, the Grizzlies Jazz Summer League broadcast this evening, and he specifically called out the traded player exception, by the way, as being like, hey, that's something we're very excited about. And he specifically noted this is a thank you to those veterans to get them out and to open up playing time for the young guys. Okay. As long as we're not just playing 5 young guys all the time, and we're not just dumping Markkanen and Kessler, I love this. I love opening the minutes of course. Giving Ace Bailey 33 minutes a game instead of 22. because you're worried about a John Collins roster crunch or something like that. We're having to manipulate like John Collins having a left pinky toe injury. Because that can be very difficult on culture as well. As saying like, I know you're healthy, but you got to sit out. Like Jordan Clarkson was no longer a winning basketball player, but having to tell him like, man, I know you're healthy, and all you want to do is hoop, but we can't risk you having a good game. Like you don't win night after night anymore, but you're good enough to pull out a good old flamethrower tactics and win a game. Can't afford it. Gotta sit. Speaking of Jordan Clarkson, I don't want to go long on him too much. I've already talked way too much about John Collins trade for 45 minutes. Thank you for sticking with me. I'll have more thoughts on Jordan Clarkson another day. He's one of my very favorite basketball players for a lot of reasons. And he's going to be playing an actual bench role in the Knicks. I have an Ode to Jordan Clarkson article, 90% written up, that I'll try to get published pretty soon. But Jordan Clarkson meant a lot to the Donovan Rudy Jazz. Our only Sixth Man of the Year winner. Cool guy. We'll miss him a lot. I also wanted to get on the horn, as I mentioned at the top, because we got 2 Summer League games in the mix, and I think we got to talk about them immediately. And look, we're going to do a full review of every single prospect on the Jazz at the end of Vegas Summer League to say, like, hey, what happened over the totality of Summer League that is worth talking about. But there are so many young players, and I think analyzing them in little microcosms is still useful, right? So, and there's just so many of them. So starting with the rookies, right? We got Ace Bailey and Walt Clayton. You'll hear him called Walter Clayton Jr. He prefers Walt, so I'm just going to call him Walt Clayton. We have not seen Paul Tanja, and RJ Luis because they are injured, so we haven't seen them. Second-year players, we got Kyle Filipowski. We got Isaiah Collier. We got Cody Williams. And we are not seeing Keontae George out there as a third-year player, but we are seeing Bryce Sensabaugh, right? So last year we had Walker Kessler out there as a third-year player. He was, and remember the games against Zach Edey were kind of like highlight, appointment viewing. But this year we got Bryce Sensabaugh out there as a third-year player. We also have Elijah Harkless, who was undrafted guy that we brought in as a two-way last year, who is playing in Summer League with Utah this year. So those 7 guys, I think I got all of them, they all matter for development. So kind of analyzing them in a microcosm is say, like, hey, what's happened over these 2 games is really important. Let's start with the big one, Ace Bailey. That's why you're here. Ace Bailey's a star. You're going to look at a stat line from day one and say, look, Mark, what are you talking about? He went 3 for 13 in his first game. Like that's bad. That's poor. Okay, we'll talk about what he does well in a minute. 1 of 5 from 3-point range. 7 rebounds. And then in tonight's game, you're probably listening to this on Tuesday. This is on Monday night's game. He had 18 points, 7 of 14, not 3 of 13 like his first game. 7 of 14, 3 of 5 from 3. So there's so much that is standing out for me about Ace Bailey. This is a steal, guys. This is incredible. I'm sometimes without words. So he is huge. I don't know how to explain it. He is so tall and big out there. And his listed height without shoes is 6'8". That's very small forward sized. You put him out there, he's gigantic. He's absolutely going to be one of the tallest players on the floor all the time. He's not a 7-footer, but he is very much a forward. I think putting it and just kind of having him and saying like, oh, he's because of his play style, he's kind of a 2-3. No, he's a forward, right? And if you end up having lineups where he is your 2 guard in a way, that's going to be a massive lineup. And that size is really, really helping him because he is a legit attacking rebounder. This is an overall thing on Ace Bailey for a minute here that starts with the rebounding. There's so much preconceived notion about Ace Bailey and who he is as a player that okay, because he's shooting all these contested, jacked mid-range jumpers all the times for these terrible Rutgers team. He is a losing basketball player. He doesn't try hard. This player archetype never tries hard. They're never good defenders. They never pass. They turn it over. They don't try to rebound. That can't be further from the truth with Ace Bailey. I am just blown away at his basketball give-a-shitness, his basketball IQ. Everything is just cool about him on the effort point of things. I think he's not exactly like a hustle guy yet. Like I don't want to get over my skis here. There's a lot of aspects to it that like, okay, so maybe some of the awareness or the hustle will have to be taught or learned along the way. But this is a guy who is trying for rebounds. He's using his height very effectively on this. He's boxing out. He's learning how to set screens. I think that's not exactly his strongest thing yet, but he's big enough and he's willing to set them. Like there's all these like minimum effort types of things that these typical player archetypes where they're just like these mid-range contested jump shooters who don't try to get all the way to the rim all the time, that you can attribute a lot of other lazy qualities to him, because the mid-range contested jumper is perhaps a lazy execution of offense as opposed to kind of doing some of the other things. That's just not the case with him. He has way better of a handle than I expected, especially in the open court. So because of his height, he's playing a lot of the forward minutes alongside opponents who can't stay in front of him. He doesn't have a pick and roll game quite yet, but especially in the open floor or in isolation situations, he is crossing guys up and leaving them in the dust. He was really shaking some guys the past 2 games. I'm excited to see what happens over the rest of Summer League in this respect, but I love his handle for a guy of his size. And not just for a guy of his size, I think he has a good handle in general. And that's it's nifty. I'm really excited to see where that goes. When I was talking about the selfishness that you can unfairly attribute to players of this archetype, Ace Bailey is making such quick decisions with the basketball. Sometimes those decisions are shoot the ball as soon as I get it. But a lot of times, he has been passing really well. He had a beautiful pass where he got, he received the ball in the corner. His shot was completely smothered, and so he took a couple dribbles to his left and found a cutting Cody Williams for an and one bucket, or maybe it wasn't an and one, but Cody Williams got to the cup. But it was from a great laser bounce pass where Ace Bailey said, "I don't have it," and instead of saying like, okay, my shot isn't here, I'm gonna dribble around lazily for a little bit and float into a mid-range shot. No, he dribbled up and had his eyes open and immediately just fired some passes. He's been doing that a lot. I've really enjoyed his passing. So he had the one assist he had today was that Cody Williams bucket, and he had 3 assists. He had 3 assists in this Grizzlies game, and he had 1 assist in the Sixers game. He's playing within the flow of the offense. He is not manipulating possessions to make them his. I just think that's really, really important for players at this age. A lot of them they're so used to like, okay, it's my turn to have the ball. I'm going to slow it down, or I'm going to do things my way. He is always thinking about the best shot for the team. He's also, I think what's been impressive about the quick decision making is you see all these clips of him meandering into the paint and then shooting these contested mid-range shots. He's been missing some of these contested threes, but he is jacking them up. He's receiving the ball and saying, like, I'm shooting the 3. That is what you need in the NBA. That is a successful NBA wing player, is those quick decisions and taking the 3 better than the contested 2. I was worried we were going to have to coach that out of him over several years. Instead, it seems like he's already been taught, like, if you want to take this shot, you better do it from 3 and you better do it quickly, right? It's the kind of thing we coached out of Jordan Clarkson after a little bit too. So he went 3 of 5 from 3 today. He went 1 of 5 from 3 the other night, but I just felt like almost all of his decisions were quick. It's not completely removed from his game of the whole some of the meanderingness, but it was like 500% less than I thought it was going to be. Like it just his speed and mental decision making was very, very quick. He had a no dip three. Like one of those Klay Thompson, Joe Ingles styles where he caught it like at face level and immediately flicked it towards the rim and it went in. So he has a no dip three in his arsenal already at 18 years old, or is he 19? I don't even know. Who cares? He's a teenager with a no dip three in his arsenal. Oh man, this is gonna raise problems at his height, guys. Like that is that's very, very cool. He got up to the top of the square on a block, so he didn't have any blocks in the Grizzlies game, I don't think. No, but so on defense, up and down defensively as far as staying in front of the guy, but I thought his defensive awareness was actually pretty good as far as when weak side help or kind of being aware of the rotations around him. He was switching very well. I think he executed switches really, really intelligently. And there was one play in particular where he got up to the top of the square on a block that he got with his fingertips. He is going to learn with Taylor Hendricks and Walker Kessler. This is going to be a long, rangy, frustrating lineup. He's got real defensive talent. If he executes on that defensive talent is to be seen. And obviously, players of this archetype, if he reaches his offensive ceiling, he's going to be taking plays off defensively. That just is what it is in the NBA to be a star. Because offense is just going to be harder to execute sometimes if you're the star player. But like that is a thing. I think Utah's transition play is so frustratingly shitty all the time. He is going to be a transition menace with his speed, dribbling. He had a couple. He just barely missed an alley-oop dunk from Kyle Filipowski on a fast break, which was pretty cool. And it looked like a fast break, but it was actually after a side out in the backcourt. So I think it was either out of bounds or a shot clock violation where Bryce sent the ball inbounded. I forget who the inbounder was, but it was inbounded into Isaiah Collier, who sprinted by his man in the backcourt, just absolutely blew by him. And because of the poor defense, there's already a 3-on-3 situation on the offensive side of the court, or maybe a 4-on-3. And because of the speed of Collier, it's from a side out. So Ace Bailey was already in the offensive end, kind of in the corner, waiting for the offensive set to start. All of a sudden, we have a fast break generated out of nowhere by Isaiah Collier. He sprints down, throws an alley-oop, the easiest alley-oop to Ace Bailey. It was incredible. Ace Bailey's, I mentioned, is rebounding as well. Had an offensive rebound that he turned into a dunk. He had an offensive rebound that he turned in, like he caught it in an awkward angle where it looked like he was right under the rim. And you want a guy like that to do a 2-foot jump, just kind of get up and get a dunk. But like he felt a guy right on his back. He felt uncomfortable. So he did like this super smooth, silky opera. It's going to be on every highlight you'll see. Gets the offensive rebound, like takes a dribble away from the basket and does the most sweeping. He covered so much ground on a fadeaway jumper reverse, but like no one could guard it, right? So it was a little 10-foot fadeaway jumper where he had all the space in the world with the most feathery touch. He is the type of player where you want him to take that kind of thing. You're like, okay, you have the height and the touch where you want to do that. So I'm gushing about Ace Bailey. He just has a good vibe out there. I'm telling you, he's got the real deal skills. I'm so thrilled about him. I don't want to go too long about so many other things, but I know everyone's excited to hear about Ace Bailey and perhaps a little bit of Walt Clayton. Let me kind of walk through a little bit. I thought Walt Clayton he's a very good shooter. I think he's learning how to not turn the ball over. And he is acting like a real point guard out there. I thought the Jazz looked very good when they were running actual play sets. Walt Clayton would get into difficulty if he was running unscripted stuff. I think he would dribble off his feet. He would make a lot of bad passes. He had 6 turnovers tonight. But he's also, I just think, a very solid passer. Like he had 6 assists in 24 minutes. That's incredibly good. And he had 6 assists the other night in 25 minutes. And just really, really encouraged by where he's going to go here. And the three-point shot is absolutely there. Only 1 of 3 tonight, and he went 2 of 6 the other night from 3. No, he's got a good three-point shot. I'm not worried about that at all. Bryce Sensabaugh I was super, super out on as a rookie. Just all the credit in the world to Bryce Sensabaugh. He comes in as a third-year player. And if you're going to be a third-year player playing Summer League, you better dominate. Bryce Sensabaugh has been unquestionably the best player on the floor after 2 games. He is never missing his wide open threes. He's making contested threes, but he's also playing within himself and very balanced. He had 14 free throw attempts tonight. He's been incredible. His defense has been very good. He had 2 steals against the Grizzlies. He had 2 blocks against the Sixers. He is absolutely playing smart team defense. The shots, even if the shots are missing, they're all like, oh, Bryce Sensabaugh, watch out. He's a real player. This is a real bench scorer now, and he might even be credibly a starter if the defense sticks. Wildly, wildly impressive stuff from him. Not just because the shot was going in. He was controlling the game. He was rebounding, defending well. I really, really, really love what he did on both ends of the court. Again, like the 13 of 14 from the free throw line. And his three-point shot, after 2 games, he is 11 for 20 from 3, which is pretty great. And I'll talk about, again, there's so many players that we can get in. We can talk an hour about this. I'll just quickly mention Isaiah Collier wildly impressed me. His speed, he's definitely like he's acting like a real NBA player right now in Summer League. Nobody can really keep up with his speed and his talent for passing right now. He had 5 turnovers and some rough spots. Can't make his damn free throws, which drives me nuts. And he still cannot shoot the 3, but I think he is getting at the rim. He's getting on top of the rim and getting some good spots. So I think there's room for Collier. If he can score at the rim pretty well, there's going to be a good NBA player in there, regardless if the three-point shot takes a few years to come around. Like I've said this for a while, it doesn't have to be the three-point shot that drives it. It can be other ways of scoring. So we'll see how his summer league progresses. I really hope that he plays in Vegas. Filipowski, incredible offense. I really love him in transition as well. The defense is not there, and he does look a little stronger, but he got absolutely bodied by Adam Bona 100,000 times against the Sixers when he was defending Bona, and I don't think he looked particularly great against the Grizzlies either defensively. The offense is absolutely there. He's going to have a 10-year career being a bench guy you could bring in off the bench and say, like, look, we know our defense is going to suffer a lot, but he's going to really facilitate what our offense is doing. If you can find a way to play Filipowski at the 4 and survive with a rim-protecting center or a quality defensive center, you got something. You really, really have something. And so you can take the penalties you'll get defensively from having Filipowski out there defensively if you have someone like Walker Kessler alongside with him. I think there's a real player there. Cody Williams, not as awful as I thought he would be. He is a good isolation defender. He makes perplexing decisions on a team defense construct. But if he's ever asked to just straight up defend a guy one-on-one, he's fine. I was very encouraged by his ability to draw contact in the paint. And he tried attempting a dunk over 2 people. He does look bigger. He is not a string bean. He is absolutely put on some weight, not like Taylor Hendricks insane stuff, but he's no longer a string bean. He mentioned, I think it was as part of a Jazz Press junket or whatever, that he's eating 4,800 calories a day to try to put on weight. Wouldn't that be nice if we could all eat 5,000 calories a day to try to gain weight? But he does look a lot bigger. Does bigger mean strength? That's a different thing. Like, it's got to be functional strength, right? So we'll see what happens. I'm keeping an eye on this. The three-point shot looks slower to me. It doesn't look very fast. It looks like a lot slower than last year's release. We'll see if it goes in or not. I just want our biggest thing about Cody Williams last year. Do you impact the game? Are you out there, or are you just kind of a wallflower? He was impacting the game in these two summer league games, so we'll see what happens there. And Elijah Harkless, I think, is going to stick on the team. He had 9 free throw attempts against the Grizzlies, which I think is extremely promising for a young player. Had 6 free throw attempts in 19. So yeah, 9 free throw attempts in 17 minutes against the Grizzlies. 6 free throw attempts in 19 minutes against the Sixers. He looks really, really good out there. He's a smaller guy, but defense first. I think he will definitely settle into a role in the Jazz as being like the 5th best player on the court and being the best guard defender. I think there's a way he's going to be playing a lot of minutes for the Jazz this year, alongside Collier, alongside Clayton, where they're not going to be guarding the opposing team's point guard very well, and you want to hide Collier or Clayton on the team's worst offensive player. Put a Harkless in there for 15 minutes, let him do the dirty work. I will have way more to talk about these prospects as we go through Summer League. But as we're listening today, I want to talk a little bit about the John Collins trade, and I wanted to mention what we've seen on Ace Bailey so far, because, oh my God, I'm excited about Ace Bailey now. He's smooth, guys. He's just so good. And Clayton's a guy worth keeping an eye on. Collier I'm excited about his development as a backup point guard. Filipowski looks like a good backup forward. Not just like random guys who will be in the league for a long time. I'm saying like there will be going to be credible backup level players who have a chance to be starters. So that's what I like about Collier and Filipowski. And Sensabaugh could be on every team's rotation right now. Absolutely a 3-point shooter you need to worry about. And his defense has just looked incredible. Not incredible, that's too strong. It's looked very nice the past couple games in Summer League, where you're not worried about him being the worst defender on the court. He might be the worst defender on the court in some high-level matchups, but you're not 5-alarm fire about him right now. We saw that at the end of last year too, so very, very encouraging there. And Cody Williams, there's like a glimmer. There's a glimmer somewhere worth paying attention to. But tune into Ace Bailey tomorrow against the Thunder, or tonight, whenever you're listening to this. And I hope he plays a hefty amount of Vegas Summer League too. Okay. Lots more to hear from me this summer. Perhaps this might be it for the Jazz as far as major transactions. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of smoke on anything Kessler or Markkanen related. We have some outstanding things like Jaden Springer's non-guarantee. By the way, Jaden Springer is on the Jazz Summer League roster and just he played 14 minutes tonight. He did not play. Yeah, he did not play in the Grizzlies Summer League. He played 14 minutes with the. There's no way that he's going to stick on the Jazz, I don't think. But KJ Martin also has an $8 million non-guarantee. We'll see what happens there. But those are minor transactions that we'll tell you about them when they come across the timeline. My name is Mark Pereira. I like talking about the Jazz with you, my friends. So hit me up on Blue Skies where you can find me to yell at me. You can also find me on Instagram and talk to me there. I love talking about the Jazz with you. I love talking about Ace Bailey, and I think we got a stud who's happy, and I can't wait to talk more about him. And I hope we find better pastures for John Collins and Colin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson. Hopefully they experience some good playoff basketball that they deserve. That's all I got for tonight, and we will talk to you the next time we have a good update. Hopefully this week, next week, sometime like that. Salt City Hoops, Mark Pereira. Have a great night. Bye.